Hello, everyone, and welcome back to JoJo's Book Club. I'm JoJo, and I have a great story to read to you today. Today's story is titled, She Persisted, 13 American Women Who Changed the World. This book was written by Chelsea Clinton, and it's illustrated by Alexandra Boisier. Let's see who published this book. This book was published by Philomel Books. And I'm going to read the dedication page to you. Chelsea Clinton says that this book was inspired by Senator Elizabeth Warren and in celebration of all women who persist every day. I guess I should tell you that the word persist means to keep going on even when things get really difficult. And then the illustrator, Alexandra Boisier, says that this book is dedicated to some heroines of mine, Coretta Scott King, Sophie Scholl, and my mother, Berta Boisier. Here we go. Sometimes being a girl isn't easy. At some point, someone probably will tell you no. They will tell you to be quiet and maybe even tell you your dreams are impossible. Don't listen to them. These 13 American women certainly did not take no for an answer. They persisted. So we're going to get a little bit of information about 13 different women. And hopefully one of these women is really interesting to you and inspires you to learn more about her. I hope so. The first person is Harriet Tubman. Harriet Tubman was born a slave, and her story could have ended there. Instead, she persisted, escaping from slavery and becoming the most famous conductor on the Underground Railroad. She risked her life many times to lead countless slaves to freedom, including her family, friends, and strangers. Every person that she led to freedom arrived safely. That is really incredible. What a risk. And for each page, for each woman, there's a quote that person said. And hers says, I should fight for my liberty as long as my strength lasted. The next woman is Helen Keller. Once Helen Keller became blind and deaf as a toddler, meaning she could not see and she could not hear, or she had very limited hearing or the ability to see. Very few people thought that she'd ever be able to learn to read, write, or speak. But she persisted. Helen learned how to do all three of those things and not only became the first person with deaf blindness to graduate from college, but she used her story to help fight for more opportunities for people with disabilities in the United States and all around the world. Her quote says, "One can never consent to creep when one feels the impulse to soar." To me, that means that she really wanted to do big things. The next person is Clara Lemlick. After her family fled poverty and the threat of violence in Ukraine for a new home in New York City, Clara Lemlick got a job working at a garment factory. She wrote that the factory's conditions made women into machines, and so she persisted, organizing picket lines and strikes that ultimately helped win better pay, shorter hours, and safer working conditions for thousands of workers, both men and women. I'm one of those who suffers from the abuses described here, and I move that we go on a general strike. So look at that. She organized all of those people to make it safer to work. Nellie Bly became a reporter in part because a male writer had said that working women were a monstrosity, meaning something really awful that shouldn't happen. She wanted to prove that women could do anything. At times, she put her own safety at risk. She persisted throughout her career in exposing real monstrosities, pretending to be a sweatshop worker, and pretending to be a patient in a mental hospital to show just how badly people were being treated. So she was an undercover reporter at a time when there weren't even very many women reporters at all. Her quote says, "I've never written a word that did not come from my heart. I never shall." Wow. Inspired from an early age by her brother's childhood illnesses, Virginia Apgar was determined to be a doctor long before many girls had such dreams. Even though she qualified to be a surgeon, the male head surgeon at her hospital discouraged her because she was a woman. Nevertheless, she persisted, becoming an anesthesiologist, and she created the Apgar score to test a newborn baby's health. All hospitals all over the world are still using it today. And her quote says, "Nobody but nobody's going to stop breathing on me." So she developed a test that helps us determine if a baby is very healthy, if they need help somehow, so that way we can keep them healthy and safe. I wonder how many babies she's helped. After Maria Tallchief's family moved to California, partly to support her dreams of becoming a dancer, she was teased by students in school for her Native American heritage, and later was encouraged to change her name to something that sounded Russian, because at that time, many professional dancers were from Russia. She persisted, though. She ignored all the taunting and the poor advice to become the first great American prima ballerina, and she kept her name, Maria Tallchief, which is a nod to her Native American heritage. Her quote said, "It never occurred to me to say, it hurts to do that." It takes a lot of strength to be a prima ballerina, and you really have to push your body and keep trying. As a 15-year-old riding a bus home from school in Montgomery, Alabama, Claudette Colvin was expected to give up her seat to a white woman just because she was African American. In her refusal to get up, she persisted in taking a stand for what's right, helping to inspire Rosa Parks to make the same choice 9 months later, an act that many point to as the starting point of the modern civil rights movement. Did you know that Rosa Parks was not the first woman to refuse to give up her seat to a white person? And in fact, Claudette Colvin was one of the first ones and might have even inspired Rosa Parks to do the same. Could you imagine being only 15 years old and standing up to so many people who want you to move and want you to do something that's just not right? It's incredible. Her quote says, "I knew then and I know now that when it comes to justice, there's no easy way to get it. You can't sugarcoat it. You have to take a stand and say, this is not right." It's not always easy to do the right thing. When Ruby Bridges was in kindergarten, meaning she was only 4 or 5 years old, many schools across America, particularly in the South, still refused African American students their equal right to education, meaning Black children and white children were not allowed to go to the same school. And a lot of times, the schools for white children were much better than the schools that were available to Black children. Ruby would not be treated like a second-class student. She persisted. She walked for weeks past angry, hateful protesters to integrate an all-white elementary school in New Orleans, meaning she was the first Black student at that school to attend an all-white school. That takes a lot of bravery. And her quote says, "That fateful walk to school began a journey, and we all must work together to continue moving forward." So she was even younger than Claudette. She was only 4 or 5. As the first woman to serve as both a U.S. representative and a U.S. senator, Margaret Chase Smith could have let that fact alone be her legacy, because that's pretty amazing. However, she persisted in championing women's rights and more opportunities for women in the military, standing up for free speech, and supporting space exploration. The head of NASA once said that we wouldn't have put a man on the moon without Margaret. Pretty incredible. Her quote says, "The right way is not always the popular and easy way. Standing for right when it is unpopular is a true test of moral character." And again, that's really true. It's not always easy to do the right thing, and it takes a lot of courage to do that. Speaking of space, Sally Ride always believed women could succeed in any math or science career. Although not everyone agreed, she persisted and she became the first American woman in space. That wasn't enough for Sally. She traveled into space once more and then created science and engineering programs specially for girls so she could help generations of young women achieve their dreams too, both on Earth and in outer space. Her quote says, "Young girls need to see role models in whatever careers they may choose, just so that they can picture themselves doing those jobs someday. You can't be what you can't see." I love that after she met her dream of going to space, she created programs to help other girls do the same. When, as a kid, Florence Griffith Joyner visited her father in the Mojave Desert, he would urge her to run faster and faster, to run as fast as a jackrabbit. Even when she had to leave college to help support her family, she persisted in her training on the track, then went back to school and got faster and faster. Her unbroken world records in the 100-meter and 200-meter sprints set at the 1988 Summer Olympics mean that she's still the fastest woman ever. Her quote says, "When anyone tells me I can't do anything, I'm just not listening anymore." I really love that quote. And actually, I remember having a Barbie doll called Flojo, named after this runner. And I loved that doll so much because the doll had different colored fingernails. Every single fingernail was a different color. And I just thought that was really cool. Plus, I thought it was cool that she could run fast. Here's a woman you might know, Oprah Winfrey. Oprah Winfrey's grandmother expected Oprah to follow in her footsteps to become a maid. Oprah knew, even as a little girl, that her dreams would take her somewhere else. She persisted in turning those dreams into her reality, and she became a media superstar, working in movies, books, magazines, theater, and most of all, television, where the Oprah Winfrey Show remains the highest-rated talk show of all time. Her quote says, "The biggest adventure you can ever take is to live the life of your dreams." Have you heard of Oprah Winfrey before? Have you seen her maybe on TV? Yeah. And finally, watching fictional judges on television inspired Sonia Sotomayor to want to be a real-life judge when she grew up. She knew she'd have to speak English as well as she spoke Spanish, study hard in school, and manage her diabetes before she could one day wear a judge's robe with a gavel in hand. She persisted, eventually becoming a Supreme Court justice and the first ever Latina to sit on America's highest court. Her quote says, "I have never had to face anything that could overwhelm the native optimism and stubborn perseverance I was blessed with." How cool is that? So, if anyone ever tells you no, if anyone ever tells you that your voice isn't important or that your dreams are too big, remember these women. They persisted, and so should you. And that, my friends, is the end of that story. Now, I'm going to leave you with this question because there's only 13 women in here, but I'm sure there's lots more women who've done amazing things. And I wonder, if you could add another woman to this book, who would you add and why? Is it somebody that you know, maybe someone in your family? Or is it somebody that you've always wanted to meet but never got the chance to? If I could add somebody to this story, I would probably add Frida Kahlo, because her art is really cool and she had a lot of ideas about men and women being equal, and she spoke up about that quite a lot. Happy reading. Thank you for being with us, and I hope to see you next time. Bye, everyone.